Let me start. Good morning, everyone. I'm Raymond Paredes, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I know that all of you are getting ready for the new school year. Some of you are trying to squeeze in vacations before you do that. I just came back from a pleasant but fatiguing week in Hawaii with my grandchildren, 4 to 2-year-old. That's a lot. It's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of work. So anyway, I'll be very brief in my remarks. I'm very pleased that this group has come together, and its purpose is very simple, and that is that we want to improve communications between the coordinating board and two-year institutions, and we want to use that increased level of cooperation, communication to help improve the student success and the academic achievements of our students. We recognize here at the coordinating board that two-year institutions are absolutely the linchpin to the whole educational enterprise, and you have the complex mission. You have to help us produce more baccalaureate degrees, and you have to help us produce more associate's degrees, and you have to help us produce a lot more well-trained workers in a variety of career and technical education fields. The environment in Texas has changed dramatically since the completion of this last session. All of you know about the passage of House Bill 5, which will change our work to some extent. We have work to do on the Texas Success Initiative, which once again will have some profound ramifications for the work that you all do, and we feel that this stakeholder committee can be a very useful mechanism for making sure that we share information and work together towards a common goal. Once again, I thank all of you for coming. I think this is a particularly productive group prospectively, because I don't think we've ever had such a balance between presidents and members of boards of trustees, so that we have the full range of leadership of two-year institutions represented on this committee. So we look forward to working together effectively, and we also want to get to work right away. So with that, I'll turn it over to David Gardner.
Thanks. We're really excited all of you are here. I do want to remind you at the beginning that all our meetings are webcast. I don't think that will change anything that you do, but it's always wise to know that essentially anybody in the world can be listening to what you're saying here today. So, and hopefully a lot of people are tuned in. We hope so, because we think your efforts are going to be very important. I just wanted to briefly go through our charge as it exists now, and it's possible something could be added later if desired by everyone. But the first charge of the committee is to develop a 5-year statewide strategic plan for community colleges with broad statewide objectives and targets. And you'll recall that the state used to require that such a strategic plan be put together, and then it went away legislatively. The board produced those plans. In fact, many years ago, I worked with the community colleges to produce that first plan. I'm not sure any of you were here at the time. Maybe Mimi. Not even Mimi. See, I'm older than everyone. But so we need to develop a process for doing that. Typically in the past, the board staff has worked with institutions to develop that, and it's vetted with the schools. And I think we have some history of doing that well together, and I think we can do that. We may want to use some type of different process, and that's something we'll work out with you. The second is to make sure that we have the data that's necessary to provide to the legislature on various topics. There are things that, of course, are different in terms of the financing of your institutions and your resource capabilities, and we want to make sure that not only do we provide them with existing data in a timely way, but that we have the data that we need to provide them. So there may be additional data that we may need to collect if you deem warranted going forward. And so that's something we'll discuss with you. You need to know that at the coordinating board, it may not seem like it, but we go out of our way to not collect any more data than necessary. In fact, we have a committee that reviews all data requests to make sure that we don't have existing data that could provide that end. And in fact, our largest increase in data a number of years ago was for community and technical colleges, and it was because of Perkins. We were actually somewhat resistant internally to collect that data because it was a massive data collection, but it was absolutely necessary for the purposes of the institutions receiving those funds that we collect that data. And it's turned out to be very, very useful data. So that will be something we look at. And really, finally, the most important is to build collaborative relationships between all the institutions and the coordinating board, so that we really use our state resources in a way that we have improvement initiatives that are in place that everyone buys into, supports, and that we continue to move forward. And I think this is an exciting time, and that I think the institutions themselves have initiated a number of projects statewide and locally that have really improved success rates. I think everyone understands that there's a long way to go, but I can tell you that when we talk about improvements in success, some of it we can't explain exactly why, because it's been due to local efforts that may differ from institutions to institutions. So we're really happy that we can move forward on that. Now let me make one other comment. We just went through sunset. So you're aware of it, and if you are aware of some issues, but one of them is that we are really directed to have many fewer committees. So we only have, we're going to be very selective in the committees we have. So just the fact that we're having this one emphasizes the importance even more than we already would have for you, because there are committees that we can't have. We're having to eliminate committees going forward in the next few months. So we're very cautious, even more cautious about the committees we have. So this is critical. But part of what comes along with that is we're limited in terms of how long a committee can exist. We can have no committee for more than 4 years, but we can reconstitute it. So I just wanted you to know that we're letting you know now that this committee, as currently constituted, will end in 4 years, but that means if it goes well for everyone, the board can certainly reconstitute the committee, but we have to have a time limited, and we'll discuss that process probably in the beginning of the 4th year, and I'm assuming we'll want to move forward. So having said that, I don't know if everyone knows each other, so maybe we could at least very briefly introduce ourselves. And for those of you, you know Raymond is the commissioner. I'm the deputy commissioner for academic planning and policy at the coordinating board, and have been here at least since the first community college strategic plan. William, why don't you start?
Sure. William Serrata. I serve as president of El Paso Community College.
I'm Greg Powell, president of Panola College.
I'm Anita of the Southwest Texas Junior College Board of Trustees.
Jeremy McMillan, president at Grayson College.
I'm Millicent Vallick. I'm president of Brazosport College.
I'm Stacy Silverman. I'm the interim assistant commissioner for Workforce, Academic Affairs, and Success here at the coordinating board.
David Montaigne, Texas State University System Regent.
Marie Flickinger, Regent, San Jacinto College.
Mike Reeser, Chancellor at TSTC.
Marcus Camillo, President, Del Mar College in Corpus Christi.
Gary Tomerlin, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Community and Technical Colleges here at the Coordinating Board.
Yeah, and I'd like to say Gary's been a real asset. I've learned a lot in various meetings with Gary in terms of career and technical education areas that you'd be surprised at some of the detail I know now. That I thought I knew something about career and technical ed, but I know much more now, and so I think that's going to be very helpful. Also, you noted that Stacy was the interim assistant commissioner. We're in the process of the search for that, and we'll be conducting interviews shortly. And I have to say we have a very, very good pool of candidates from all sectors. So I'm excited about that. So with that, why don't we turn over to Gary?
Okay. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw for term lengths. If you remember in the communication we sent you concerning the composition of this committee, we talked about there's going to be a drawing to determine who has a 1-year, 2-year, or a 3-year term length. As part of this, TSTC and the Texas state system have alternating roles to where as the president or chancellor of TSTC rotates off, then Lamar takes that role and we get a trustee from the TSTC system. So we're going to let Mike or David draw first. Y'all have a preference? And then, because in essence, they're drawing for each other. They have to have the same term length. So I'm going to let Mike draw first since he's here.
You mean pull from here?
Yeah, pull from here. Pick a number. No, go ahead. 3 years. And
Is this winning or losing?
It's Mike, I think you lost.
It'll take a couple of meetings before you can figure that out.
Now I took a 3-year
Go back and
out of
ask
the
for a salary
trustees.
increase now.
So if you want to go ahead and pick a president, if you want to pick a trustee. Oh, it's yours.
Yep. Okay.
You get a trustee.
Got a 1 year.
No, you already got one. You already got one.
So what are the other labels now?
Well, let's talk when the meeting's over.
Do you smell a fix?
Yeah.
We have 2 trustees that are not with us today, so we'll just give them. And if y'all would, write your names on the back of here so that when the meeting's over, we can make sure that we get who has what. If you'll just leave it at the place and we'll pick it up. That way we'll our membership list and we'll know who has what term and so forth. Okay?
I think, Gary, it would be helpful for those watching on the web to know who's received 1, 2, and 3-year terms.
Okay.
Maybe you could just,
1.
My turn.
Mike
Mike's
was,
got a 3.
3.
I was 3.
2.
3. 2.
1.
1.
2.
3.
okay.
You want to go
I
ahead and draw
couldn't
for
do
the
that.
2 absent trustees? We give this one to Charles Weaver, 3-year. And who's the missing one?
George Black.
George Black, 2-year. Okay. Do you want to do the committee chair, David, or?
Go ahead.
Okay. Now we get to discuss the election of a committee chair and a chair-elect. And the reason we want to do the term lengths first is we probably need to plan and make sure that we have a little bit of continuity, perhaps that we don't elect a chair with a 1-year, hang on, I said that wrong, a chair with a 1-year term and a chair-elect with a 2-year term or something like that. But it doesn't in any way mean that just that all of you are eligible to participate. And so with that, let's go for nominations. Millicent.
It would be my pleasure to nominate Marie Flickinger as chair. Marie is very experienced with all of the trustee issues, represented the state well in that capacity, and has been involved with the legislature and is a long-term member of the San Jacinto Community District, and I believe she has a 2-year term. Is that correct? So if she were willing to accept that, that would be my pleasure.
Do we need to
I'll
vote?
second.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor, I guess?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, with that said, do we have
Okay, chair-elect.
who? And you want to turn it over to Marie now, or you want to
Yeah,
go?
I was going to suggest, why don't you change places, and since you're chair, why don't you come and get at the table?
Take your name.
Got Mark. That's good.
my What term do you have?
Anita, what was your term?
That's okay.
It's just 1 year.
Get my
I already
score
set it
sheet
up.
here.
And grade yours. Oh, yeah. Did you get that? Did you write it down?
So,
For vice chair, I would like him to recommend Mark. Although he and I have not known each other long, I've heard very good things about him. I understand he'd be willing to serve, so I'd like to nominate Mark.
Thank you.
Second that.
Mark, your term is for how long? 1 year, so you really can't be chair-elect, can you?
I can trade. I'll do whatever the group desires. I'll.
You could, but you won't be here next year.
I wouldn't mind switching. Wanted to do that.
Whatever the group's.
Well, why don't we simply, let me suggest that we go forward, and effectively, he's vice chair throughout the year, so if you're not able to attend, he will be able to serve in your place, and then we can just elect another, if that's okay with the committee.
Fine with me.
It seems like your will to have him as the, okay?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
That was quick.
That was quick, yes. Do we need any other officers?
well,
Okay. So the next item on the agenda would be the updating outcome-based funding for community and technical colleges. Susan Brown will do the presentation.
sure.
Welcome, Susan. Thank you very much. I'm Susan Brown. I'm with the Coordinating Board, and I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of the funding formulas and how they've changed. Y'all can see them right in front of you, or look at this overhead, whichever one. Let me see if I can. Thank you. Okay. Here we go. Okay, the formulas this time were changed, as I think most of y'all know, and it started out, and these are biennial numbers. So it started out, each community college now receives $1 million in base funding, which that actually is replaces the small institution supplement that only a few of the institutions received in the past. Of the remaining formula funding, 90% is based on enrollment, contact hour enrollment, according to the cost study that is done each year on a 3-year rolling average. And then the other 10% is based on outcomes-based funding on those student success points. These are the success points as we've talked about them and how they were distributed. Developmental education, those gateway courses, attaining 15 or 30 semester credit hours, credentials awarded, so whether you received a certificate, an associate degree, or for those that offer a BAT, the bachelor's degree. STEM awards received a bump of a 0.25 over and above that, and then transferred to a general academic institution after having completed 15 semester credit hours. Now, one of the things, and as Dr. Powell's very familiar with, we're working with some of the community colleges on that transfer part, especially those along the border, to be able to include information for those students who transfer out of state. And so we've been going back and forth and trying to figure out how we can get that incorporated into the whole process. There are two other areas, the ABE, so Adult Basic Education, and English as a Second Language, where we really don't have good data. We're hoping to, once the new TSI gets put in place, be able to have really good data on that and be able to incorporate that. It's something we will be taking to the Formula Advisory Committee this time, and we can keep y'all informed of that. The other piece of that is we have a statutory rider to work with the community colleges, and actually we're meeting in a couple of weeks sometime, can't remember when, to work on how we can set these success points up so that community colleges, instead of competing with each other, compete against themselves to earn back those points. And that's something we're working on, and as far as I know right now, we haven't come up with a solution to that, but but it is something we're working on together. And so we will continue to work on that one. As far as the funding level for the community colleges from last year to this year, or last biennium to this biennium, there was a 2.1% increase in the amount of funding that was received in the 14-15 biennium. That does, there is a little bit of extra money that was actually trusteed to the coordinating board for Texas Southmost College as part of their split between UT Brownsville and Texas Southmost College. There is some money that was trusteed because of some uncertainty in what's going to happen as they move forward. It's just a small amount. They did receive all their technical funding and their developmental ed funding. So now we're going to move on to TSTC, and TSTC actually moved to what we call a return value funding model, and Mike can speak to this as well or better than I can. Basically, we look at the students who leave TSTC, whether they graduated or are no longer in attendance for at least 2 years and don't show up as a transfer student anywhere. We take those and we work with TWC and we look at the earnings of those students and compare that to minimum wage. Anything over and above it, we apply a tax rate of 7% and a discount of the 1.5 for those students, and we get a value added. So how much are they adding back to the state, the benefit to the state, and that is how they are now getting funded. And we will have a committee working with them again in the interim to refine that model, and it is for those students right now, for those students who have completed at least 9 semester credit hours. So 9 semester credit hours or more. And they get the funding. We look over a 5-year period to get the averages and that sort of thing. The funding for TSTC actually went up 2.9%, and that's across all of their campuses, all the 4 major campuses. Lamar Technical and State Colleges actually continue on the 100% enrollment model. They are not participating in the student success points or in the value added at this point. So that's very short and sweet presentation. Are there any questions? Hi, Mimi.
Okay. And keep my finger on it.
No, you can take your finger on it.
Technology is overwhelming. No, I really was curious when you look at the second block on the TSTC model, where they're leaving and entering the workforce and capturing earnings. Mm-hmm. Do you have that capacity to do that for community colleges?
We have it out on our website under gainful employment.
Okay, so that's what we're using for gainful.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I might add at some point, depending on the committee's desires, it might be helpful to share some of the capability of the coordinating board to provide data. We have a large amount of data that still many institutions are not aware exists. Maybe your IR person does, and we'd like to encourage you to use it. The advantage of it is that everybody knows how it was calculated, and we can disagree in terms of what it means, but it's always good to start with shared data. So if at some point you'd like to learn more about that, we'd be glad to share it with you.
And along those lines, we currently don't capture individuals who are employed out of state.
Okay.
We are working with TWC on a pilot. They have access to a national database. Mm-hmm. I say national. I think there are about 20 states that are participating right now. And so we're working with them to get a pilot started where we can send that information to them. Then they have to send it to that national database, and that would allow us to capture some of the out-of-state people that go to work out of state.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add briefly, if there are no, did you have an additional question?
No, I was going to thank Susan. I was going to thank Susan for her presentation.
I just wanted to also thank everyone here. Some of you may not remember, others will, that several years ago, our board sat down with trustees, we sat down with the presidents and began the process of talking about success points. And it's clear that the association provided great support to that during the session, provided some modifications to it that I think were very important. I think that the base funding for all institutions was really an important decision. I think it helps provide a solid base for schools regardless of size to replace the concept of small institutions. There are a number of things that were modified through discussions by the institutions themselves. I think were a great addition. Also, our staff worked very closely with TSTC, and I'm hoping that that's just the beginning of our efforts together. I think it shows how much we can accomplish when we work together, and I do know there's been a lot of attention that both our community colleges and TSTCs have developed some outcomes-based models nationally, and that's getting a lot of good publicity for the state, but it also reflects the efforts of the institutions are trying to move forward and doing the right thing for the students and to make the best use of state and local money. So I think it's important to note.
Thank you, David. We've also had Charles Rex Weaver. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Rex Weaver from Plain, Texas. I got lost. I had it down as west, not east. And I looked around and said, this is not where it is.
Well, we're glad.
I found out you can't get there from here.
Well, we have some good news. Someone else pulled for your slate of years, and you have been picked to serve 3 years. So, welcome.
I got a 3-year sentence.
Yes, you do. Okay, next, Dominic Chavez, is a member of the coordinating board staff, will give us an update on the 83rd legislative session.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dominic Chavez. I'm the Director of External Relations here at the Coordinating Board. I've been asked to provide a brief overview of some of the key highlights from the last legislative session that ended at the end of May, or at least the first part of the sessions ended in May. So what I'll do today is just briefly highlight some of the budget items that came out, again, specifically related to two-year colleges, as well as some of the policy issues. And I think you have a copy of the presentation in front of you as we go through this. I think this works it. So this first slide just shows you the volume of activity that happened during the legislative session. As you can see, there were about 5,800 bills that were introduced, and about 1,400 of those ended up on the governor's desk. About 24 were vetoed, and a number of budget items were also line item vetoed, both from the general budget as well as the appropriations budget were taken out by the governor once it crossed his desk. In terms of higher education, the Coordinating Board tracked over 650 bills related to educational funding and policies that impacted higher education overall. Eventually, about 150 of these became law. There were some key vetoes, none that directly related to two-year colleges, but you can see those there just for your reference. In terms of the overall funding situation, as you can see, state funding across all functions of government was increased by 8.1%. And total state funding for education was increased by $53 billion, or roughly 7%. You can see the breakdown there by sector. For higher education, all funds, we managed to increase 4.4%, which, again, if you look back last session, which I believe we saw about 11% reduction in higher education, if I'm not mistaken, we didn't make up all the ground, but at least we were in the positive, and so that was a significant outcome from this legislative session, given the budget situation was a little stronger than we were 2 years ago. In terms of some specific programs that you may be interested in, state financial aid was the #1 priority for the Coordinating Board, understanding that if we're going to make our progress towards closing the gaps, we have to make sure that higher education is accessible and affordable. And so programs like the Texas Grant Program and the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant, which is for two-year colleges, both experienced significant increases. Now, again, this was on the heels of reductions last biennium, but we not only made up ground, but we actually saw more investment in these programs, which is a positive. You can also see some of the other programs, such as Beyond Time, the Texas Work Study Program, and Teach for Texas. Although, don't be alarmed by that large percentage increase. That's a reflection of how poorly that program was doing with funding over the last couple biennium. In terms of other major programs, there are significant investment in graduate medical education and nursing education, as you can see here, particularly in graduate medical education. The legislature not only created a couple of new programs, but also has invested significant more dollars into that to help expand the number of slots we have available for doctors, et cetera. Here again are some additional programs. One in particular, and this was a subject of much discussion, was the Hazelwood exemptions. As you know, the challenge both for universities and community colleges is that the Hazelwood exemptions, which is essentially provides for qualifying veterans free tuition and fees up to 150 credit hours at a public community college, university, et cetera, has really resulted in a significant burden to many institutions across the state. And so what the legislature did this session was identify $30 million to help reimburse foregone tuition and fees for institutions. And so that will be allocated via formula and, as we go through this biennium. But that was the first time, I think, in the history of the program where money has actually been set aside by the state to help at least offset, by no means cover all the costs, but offset the costs. So that was a significant event in this legislative session that may impact your institutions. Susan talked about some of this. I won't spend a whole lot of time, but here is the kind of the funding breakdown for the technical and state colleges that you can see here. Again, the TSTCs will be operating under the value-added model, whereas the Lamar's, the INA funding, instruction administration, will continue to be allocated on contact hours, but you can see how the funding breaks out for this sector. For our community colleges, again, Susan touched upon this. You have the base funding of $50 million to be appropriated to each community college in lieu of the, or instead of the small institution supplement making up the difference there. And again, student success funding, 10% of the dollars will be allocated based on the student success funding model. Again, this is just a reiteration of something that Susan went over previously, how these dollars will be allocated to the community college sector. And again, for the return value model for the TSDCs. And I do want to reiterate here that having worked in the External Relations Office, we've been getting a lot of attention from organizations like Jobs for the Future, the Lumina Foundation, and other states, based on the adoption of these two models for the two-year colleges. I think it's safe to say, arguably, that Texas is by far the largest state to adopt outcomes-based funding for any sector of higher education. Arguably one of the most diverse student populations to have outcomes-based funding implemented. Many of the states that have gone before us may have a handful of community colleges or a handful of universities. Obviously, we have 50 community colleges. Additionally, we've got large urban, small rural, just the diversity of types of institutions. So we are gaining a lot of attention, and Chancellor Reeser also knows that the TSTC model is actually quite unique in how it's been designed. And so just to reiterate what Dr. Gardner was saying, we have been getting a lot of attention, and particularly getting a lot of questions of how did all these people come together and work together towards the same goal, because many other states are in conflict over how to do this, and yet here we were with both the community college sector and the TSDCs working in concert towards adopting these models. So I just wanted to reiterate that. That's what we're hearing from around organizations around the country. In terms of key priorities for the coordinating board kind of broke down into three categories, three building blocks to help facilitate our goal of having a competitive workforce in the near future. The three categories were basically a productive higher education system, restructuring our financial aid system to extend financial aid to more students, and it's sustaining rigor in our high school curriculum to ensure that our students are both college and career ready when they make their choices beyond high school. A couple of the policies I'll now start to highlight for you. First, in this passed in a couple of different vehicles, but ultimately it was in the Senate Bill 215, which was the coordinating board sunset legislation, was the creation of a cap for associate degrees to create statewide consistency across our public two-year colleges. And essentially the cap will be whatever SACS or an accrediting body determines is appropriate for that particular degree field. In almost all cases, not every case, but almost all cases, that'll be 60 credit hours. But in the event of like accounting or some other field that requires additional coursework, it will be set at whatever that standard is based on, again, the accrediting body or licensure requirements. And again, the rationale for that is we recognize with our data, although this number has improved over the last couple of years, too many of our two-year college students are graduating with far too many credits, which is a cost both to the state but also to students and their pocketbook when they have to pay for more tuition and fees. A couple major changes to state financial aid programs that will affect two-year colleges. First, Texas grants, and I'm sitting next to Steve here. We worked very closely with the author, Donna Howard, who helped push this change through. But for Texas grants, as you know, that program currently is available to both the universities and to our two-year colleges. However, what we've discovered in working with our community college partners and the financial aid directors is some of the requirements were perhaps too onerous for community college students to comply with. You'll also recall that last session, under a recommendation from the coordinating board, the legislature adopted a priority model for university Texas grant students, which added some academic elements that really don't make a whole lot of sense for two-year college students. So to create a more coherent program and create a programs that match or align with the mission and the student bodies at the institutions, what has passed this session is that Texas grants will become a university-only program in fiscal year 2015. It will also provide an increased eligibility pathway for students who received a TEOG and who meet these requirements on this slide to gain access to Texas grant once they show up on a university campus, which currently does not exist. There's a very narrow pathway that community college students can actually attain a Texas grant once they move on. And again, these changes will take place in fiscal year 15. Now, one thing, and it's highlighted in that big orange box to draw your attention to it, to ensure that we don't lose any students by this shift from a community college to a university-only program, the coordinating board is going to execute a transfer of funds from Texas grants to TEOG to ensure we don't lose any level of service for those students when we make this transition. And then going forward, those programs will be funded commensurate with their students. And then finally, which was a major change, and again, it will only affect two-year colleges for the first year, but going forward for universities, this was not a legislative change, but through the budget process, the budget, both the Senate and House budgets that were passed, essentially right-sized Texas grants. In other words, they set a award amount, a target award amount for universities to encourage universities to meet in order to serve more students. Right now, Texas grants statutorily, you can give all the way up to statewide average tuition and fees, which for the next year will be about $7,700. By setting a $5,000 target, again, it does not require universities to give each student $5,000. It encourages them to do so. And if they do that with the dollars that we were appropriated, we can serve 84% of new eligible students. And so that was a positive outcome that's give a little more flexibility to institutions, but encourage them to be very conscientious about how they package dollars to get as much aid to as many students as possible. Another major change to the Be On Time program, again affecting the two-year colleges, is in fiscal year 15, similar to Texas grants, this will become a university-only program. This was actually a Sunset Commission recommendation. Again, the rationale for this was that Be On Time has very strict forgiveness requirements. It's a great program. If you receive an award and you graduate in 4 years with a baccalaureate and you do so with a B average, the challenge was that's not very effective for a community college student who often take more than 4 years to move their way through the process. And so it simply didn't have the same level of efficacy for community college students. So they moved that program to university only, provide institutions a little more flexibility, universities on how to set awards, and institutions will receive their proportional share of dollars that they put into the system to support the program on their campus level. So beginning fiscal year 15, community college students will no longer have access to this particular program, unless, of course, they move to a university and then decide to get it there. The commissioner mentioned this in his opening remarks, another significant change related to high school curriculum that we will be monitoring, working in very close collaboration not only with our partners in higher education, but also the State Board of Education, the Texas Workforce Commission, and TEA is the implementation of House Bill 5 and changes to the high school curriculum and various diploma plans. You can see some of the key highlights here. One of the things that we're going to work very closely with is making sure that we have strong advising and working with those partners, because now the advising has to happen much earlier in the process. Students will be making decisions about their plan 8th, 9th grade, and they have to understand what those choices will mean if they at some point want to go to a TSTC or a community college or a university, and making sure they understand what those choices mean and how that's going to affect those potential plans. In fact, we have started new training for our Advise Texas advisors to help start this process. And so that's something the coordinating board will be working very closely with, and certainly with the other agencies to make sure the curriculum changes, that we don't lose anything in terms of our college and career readiness goals over the short and long term. Finally, a couple of key pieces of legislation here. I won't touch bases on all these. I think one in particular may be interest to your colleges is Senate Bill 498, which reduces the number of cumulative credit hours that would initiate the reverse transfer process. This is going to be, I think, critical relative to the community college funding formula and outcomes-based funding, since awards of associates and certificates is one of the outcomes. We're trying, and I think the state here, by making this change, is trying to facilitate that if a student makes that transfer to a university and has earned some sort of credential by virtue of the hours that they've collected, they ought to find some way to help them earn that credential and put that under their belt, if you will. In terms of workforce development, if there were Google or Twitter Analytics has a word app that shows the mentions, high mentions. One of the themes that came out of this session was, workforce needs, workforce, career and technical education. There was more than a dozen bills in some form or fashion that dealt with this. One in particular is Senate Bill 441, which actually started a conversation during the interim with the TSTC, Texas Workforce Commission, Governor's Office, and the Coordinating Board about the Fast Start program, which are, create programs that support competency-based rapid deployment education delivery models that are highly aligned with the workforce. There's a couple other bills that aren't on here that I do want to mention. One in particular, and again, Steve worked very closely with the higher education community and the coordinating board, and this had a significant impact last interim. Senate Bill 62 related to bacterial meningitis. As you will recall, last session, the legislature passed a requirement, a significantly expanded requirement, that all students enrolling under the age of, I think it was 30, under the age of 30, had to receive or show proof of a bacterial meningitis vaccine no less than 5 years prior to the date of enrollment. Well, as you can imagine, we had a very significant challenge in terms of implementing that at our community and technical colleges, because not only the nature of the enrollment process, that often students show up the day of or the day before classes begin, sometimes the day after classes begin, to enroll, and then suddenly they're told you have to have a vaccine. And we also have a lot of adult students, return to school students that are older than typical 18-year-old who may not have had vaccines that show up on campus, and ultimately there was a cost factor. So what Senate Bill 62 tried to do was to alleviate some of the concern. It reduced the age from 30 down to 22. So that, again, we're focusing in on the population that is most at risk for bacterial meningitis and align it with federal requirements for the vaccine. That helped alleviate, again, some of those adult learners who were being captured with this requirement. And I think the more significant part was, again, to align a process for the vaccine with how community colleges operate in terms of admissions. The state agreed to direct the Department of State Health Services to adopt an internet-based online exemption process. So as it stands right now, a student who chooses they do not want the vaccine for reasons of conscience or medical reasons, currently, you literally have to send in a request to Department of State Health Services. They have to mail you a form by snail mail. You have to get it signed, sometimes by a doctor, have to have it notarized. You have to mail it back in. So you can imagine, again, a process for community college enrollment where you're talking about a few days sometimes. That didn't work very well. But now the Department of State Health Services is going to develop an online system that will allow for just for public community college and technical students, two-year students, to use an internet-based application so that they can expedite that process if they choose to take it. So that was a pretty significant change, and I think those two changes together hopefully will improve the implementation of that and reduce some of the concern that came from that original legislation. Finally, I'll close on this slide. House Bill 2036 created the 2036 Commission. This was legislation from Chairman Dan Branch in the House. 2036 is not a random date. That is the bicentennial of Texas. And for those of you who know Dan Branch, he's a big history buff, so he chose that intentionally. But basically what this legislation is going to do is create a commission that's charged with evaluating future education and workforce needs of Texas. The membership of the committee will include the chair of the coordinating board, the commissioner of higher education, the chair of the Texas Workforce Commission, one chair of a board of regents, one trustee. Both of those will be appointed by the governor. 2 appointments from the lieutenant governor, 2 appointments from the Speaker of the House, and each member of the presiding officer of the House and Senate Higher Education Committees. So this committee will be a pretty high-profile committee, and it's charged with, again, generally looking at workforce education and workforce needs out to 2036, and specifically looking at things like, what do we need to do to meet those goals? What should those goals be? Aligning higher education with the workforce more deliberately, looking at issues like affordability, and finally, one thing again has been a priority for Chairman Branch is how do we increase the number of national research institutions in Texas during this time frame. So this will be a significant effort. It aligns largely with some of the other ongoing efforts the coordinating board has already undertaken with our Continuous Improvement Council and others, and so we expect there will be a lot of input from higher education stakeholders, including this committee and this sector of higher education as we move forward. So with that, that's kind of the highlights, and one of the things that I think also came out, major theme that came out of this session is collaboration and cooperation. A lot of bills talked about TWC, coordinating board, TSCCs, community colleges, TEA working together towards goals. So that was a positive thing that came out of the session, major theme that came out of the session. And so I think the work of this committee in particular is going to help kind of build on that theme as we go forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
My first question would be, Jerry, can you get us presentations of both of these? Can you email them to all the members here?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I'd like to be able to study it more and that type of thing. Do we have any other questions?
I have a couple of thoughts, if I may. Mr. Chavez, I appreciate your presentation. And I've got several thoughts. I'll try to go through them as quickly as I can. The Hazelwood reimbursement issue at this term was a profound statement from the state. Let me start off by saying I don't think there's a person in here who, without a doubt, supports our veterans who are coming home and who have served and all the rights that they're entitled to. First and foremost, at Del Mar College, we became a military-friendly institution across the campus, across the district, and opened up 2 veterans centers with the drawdown of the wars in mind and our returning veterans. We did this years ago before this was even a thought, actually before the last couple of sessions, and that was a primary goal of ours. It is reaping huge benefits. We know it comes with a cost, but I just want to say that the beginnings of the reimbursement for Hazelwood is so appreciated. I hope this continues to be explored in future sessions by the community colleges and the higher ed community in general, because it is a profound need, and we want to advance that issue. You made a statement of too many credits, students coming out with too many credits and that sort of thing. Where can we find data that show that, and or how is that statement substantiated with information?
We actually, probably the easiest way is we produce, as you may know, we just released it this April, our third annual Texas Public Higher Education Almanac. The Texas Public Higher Education Almanac for short, shows we have profiles for each and every two-year college in Texas, public two-year college. And in each profile, we do show the credits and time to degree for graduates from that particular college, as well as on a statewide basis. So that's the easiest way, and we can get you copies, Gary. I think I'll grab a bunch of copies and bring them down.
There's some aggregated data in there that
shows it by state level as well as by institution, correct?
Yeah.
David.
I'd just like, thank you. I'd just like to add that I know the presidents know, but the trustees may not, that we receive a record for every student on your campus. The part of the formula process means we have to have that data. We know what courses students take. And so it's based on data submitted by you, and I know it's one of the reasons why it's very important that you're certain that accurate data is submitted to us. I know that the association, the TAC, has been talking about in the context of success points, that the real importance to take even more care when institutions support that data. But it's not just for funding. We use it for all kind of analyses such as this. And so it's out there, it's available, and as you see some of the analysis that comes from it, you may have questions or you may have alternative explanations that need to be explored for what that data means. So I'm really glad you asked that question, because we have a lot of data, and we also have data from the public schools, so we actually can follow students. We originally were doing it from the 7th grade, now we do it from the 8th grade, so we can compare with other states through public schools in the state, through higher education, across institutions. We know if students are enrolled in multiple institutions in the state simultaneously, so we have a wealth of data that I hope you'll use more and more.
Sure.
Yes, very quickly, in response to your question and comment, Mark, I was at a meeting last week in Washington of the state higher education executive officers, and one of the things we talked about was how many hours students were accumulating before they actually accomplished a degree, and we are way above the national norm. For example, we were told at this meeting that the average number of hours that a student accumulates to finish a 60-hour associate's degree nationally is about 69. In Texas, we're in the 90s. And the same thing applies to universities. For example, we were also told at this meeting that the average number of hours accumulated for 120-hour baccalaureate degree is about 129. In Texas, we're at 147. So that's clearly something that we need to take a look at for a lot of reasons. And but those numbers, the discrepancy between where we are in Texas and the rest of the country, really caught my attention.
Commissioner, I think those data are important. I mean, we hear people discussing these issues and for lack of a better term, making judgments and so forth as to how policy should be shaped in the future. But to identify those numbers and so that we can all be on the same page, that's critical. And if I can go back to the 80s, I remember finishing in 60 hours, finishing in 124 hours, 124 hours of the bachelor's degree, 36 for the master's, and 72 exact. I hit every number exactly. I was very sensitive to it because I was paying for it, and I understand that. So I have a couple of reasons for asking. So thank you, Commissioner.
Greg?
I just had a question. Do we know if those hours include developmental studies?
My understanding, and Susan's probably monitoring upstairs and she can jump down unless she's back there. My understanding is that we don't include developmental education in those hours because developmental education is not a credit. They don't count towards anything. So, but we'll verify that. And
are those just toward the Associate of Arts or the Associate of Science, or does it include other, like the Associate of Applied Science?
It would include all associate. So it's the way it's calculated, and the almanac has a detailed definition of this. That's why I'll bring them down so you can look at how we do it. My understanding is it basically looking at, for example, in 2011, the graduates with an associate's, and then literally tracking them backwards. How many hours did they accumulate? So all associate earners. Yep.
I agree that we need to look at that and figure out a way to reduce it, but I'm with Mark in wanting to know exactly what makes up those numbers, and I'll tell you what's going through my mind right now. It's not uncommon for a student at Panola College to spend a year with us earning a certificate in welding. And then they're looking over at our petroleum technology program, which is an associate degree, recognizing how much better those jobs are, and deciding, you know what, I'm going to get that degree in petroleum technology. Or, and I think that we all encourage students to do this. Students who goes through a student may go through our vocational nursing program and accumulate all of those hours, and then decide that they really want to be a registered nurse. Again, a good thing. And I just want to make sure that when we look at all those hours, we're talking about, well, that we just understand what makes up those numbers.
And I'm really glad you put that on the table, because I think one of the important roles this group can serve is to ask those questions. That's, in fact, a number that we've been producing for a number of years. And you've asked some nuanced questions that I've never heard before that I think we need to look at to make sure that, for example, with the second option you talked about, I've forgotten what it was beyond the welding, that those welding hours, whether they are included or not in that second award. And so thanks for mentioning that.
And I think William had the same question too, right? Same concern. Do we have any other questions? Very good.
I do have a question. An issue related to that is time to degree, and we started looking at it at our institution, and that's actually calendar time from start date to finish date. It's not actually time enrolled. Is that correct?
Right, and now I'm starting to get, I'm not the data expert here. My understanding, again, I think it's calculated the same way, is that it's from the point, well, I don't want to misspeak. What we'll do is we'll clarify that for you. We'll get an answer, and I guess through Gary we'll. Yeah, I don't want to misspeak exactly how, but the definitions are very clearly laid out in the almanac, and we'll get you copies of those.
I'm just trying to look at the time that students spend stopped out, and to hold us accountable for time that they're stopped out doesn't seem to be an accurate reflection of what community colleges do, and that is a reflection of the students that we have and the patterns that they take to their eventual degree. And so I'm interested in the delta between those two and the time we actually spend working on those students and with them truly engaged with us. We can work with students if they show up at our door, and we can get them in our classroom. So
we'll get you an answer, follow up.
Marie, I have one more question for Mr. Chavez. Do you recall with the Hazelwood, what was it, $30 million?
Yes.
What percentage is that of the costs that we all submitted?
I believe that for the total for Hazelwood, I want to say it was about $150 million in the last fiscal year.
I think it was about 110.
Okay, that may be right. We'll get you the answer, but it's certainly it's significant. It's the first time the state's done it, but by no means.
Maybe a 20% return.
Correct.
On the dollar.
The more
That's
important,
a good start.
It's a good start. The more important thing to recognize is those costs have been accelerating significantly. The jump in that number to 110, 150, what it is today, has gone up because of the expansion to legacy and some other things where now dependents have access. So it's certainly a step in the right direction, but you also have to understand that the curve for that cost is increasing.
I believe at our institution maybe it was 9%.
9% of?
Yes, 9% of our total cost.
Okay.
And Linda just reminded me, one of the things that LBB is going to be doing in consultation with the coordinating board, and we'll certainly turn to our higher education stakeholders, is during the interim, the LBB is being asked to look at this issue in terms of the cost, the drivers, possible sources for how do we fund or offset some of this in the long term. So this conversation is by no means done, because again, I think there's a recognition that it's going to continue to be a challenge.
There's a tremendous opportunity there for our state to do right by our veterans, and so we'll see.
Okay. And I guess David is going to get Susan so she can give us some more answers. Okay. Is she on her way? Okay. Well, in the meantime, while we wait for that, let me just, y'all have the green sheet. If any of your information is not correct on that, let me give you my email address. On here, the one that we have is actually the secretary to the board. My email address is I'll spell it out for you. It's MYNEWS, My News, at South Belt Leader, LEADER.com. That's for my newspaper, and I use that for everything. So, and does anybody else have any corrections on theirs? Oh, good.
I do, Chair. Mine is wserrata at epcc.edu.
You know, I was going to ask about these. You're very good. And William brought his, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you just give us a brief outlook at what all, it looks like everything's in here. What all is this?
This is pretty much modeled after the Chronicle of Higher Education Almanac. We provide some, if you look at, we can just skim through this thing very quickly. The front section has material on such issues as college readiness, and we compare ourselves with other states. There's information about levels of educational attainment, SAT scores. We have some information about the demographics of the educational systems in Texas. On page 9, there's a very significant chart. This is one of the issues that the Houston Endowment has been focusing on. What percentage of 8th graders in Texas accomplish some sort of higher education credential after a certain period of time. We have some data on developmental education, transfer students, and so forth. And then we have information about graduation rates for university research expenditures. And then the bulk of the volume is information on our community colleges and universities, institution by institution, so that you can look up Angelo State University and Sam Houston State University and compare the two. If you were a student or a parent, you could get information about the total cost, information about the most popular majors, the demographic breakdown of the student body, the graduation rates and so forth, admission standards, what the average test scores are. And then when you get to the final section, it's once again an institutional profile of all the community colleges in the state, all the two-year institutions, enrollment, the status of developmental education, completion rates, student characteristics, and so forth. All this information is gathered from the institutions themselves. So this is information we tell. We occasionally hear from somebody at a campus who tells us these data are inaccurate, and our response typically is, "You provided it."
Yeah, so that's why it's important to provide it. This same almanac is available online as well. You can get to it from the first page. I'd also like to mention we do have the accountability system, which every community college and two-year institution in the state participated in developing. They still meet annually to review those numbers. And that's actually data where you can even go beyond these and download additional data into spreadsheets or have your staff do it. So if they want to compare with other institutions in the state, I'm letting you know right now, they at least have that capability to do it.
We have perhaps the best data base of any state in the country on higher education. And as higher education leaders, you should take advantage of this tool. The almanac is simply the tip of the iceberg. We have much richer data than is contained in this volume, and this database and the almanac itself should be indispensable tools for you as you make decisions at the campus level about your institutions.
And you know, I heard David say early on here, in fact, I made a note of it, that they don't like to collect data. I mean, you certainly are collecting tons of data, right?
That's correct. And what I'm trying to say by saying that is we don't collect it cavalierly. We collect it with a real intent and purpose, and And we can tell you there's actually data we've quit collecting over the years. Recently, we received money from the Institute for Education Science at the federal level to begin to collect actual course grades for students. And the reason we got the money was to help reimburse institutional costs in terms of change, reporting that data to us. And in the same process, we reduced and changed our data reporting system, so ultimately you're not really reporting more information, but we're getting more out of it. And so Susan and her staff work with institutional representatives to do that. But we do, and we've periodically looked at data that's being collected to see if any of it needs to be reduced, but we're specifically directed by our new sunset bill to look at that on a regular basis. And you'll have a role in terms of do we continue with what we have or do we change some data? So,
well, this shows that you really evidently do like to collect data.
Well, most of this data has been collected for, I was probably in junior high school when the state started collecting much of this data. What we've done with it, and I think what we're proud of at our level and working with institutions is, initially, it was only collected for formula funding purposes. That same data has been used to produce almost all of this data that you have here. It wasn't used as completely as it could be. Thus, we weren't able to track student progress before. We couldn't track progress across institutions. That same data that we collect for formula funding is used for that same purpose.
Well, and I think, especially as board members, because I feel a little at a disadvantage as a board member, because I think the presidents know so much more than we do. We're only doing this, and I'm feeling a little bit, oh my gosh. And I think this can help us, and I was going to mention, I made a note here that I hope that you guys will help particularly bring the board members up on the type of things that we need to know so that we can really contribute to this effort.
We would be excited about that, and I have to say to you, as data people, Susan and I are historically been data people at the coordinating board, we want people to use the data more and more. We're frustrated when it isn't used because it's data that's important, and I think can even it forms the basis for good policy discussions, and as I mentioned earlier, the same data could be used to make different points, and I think the idea is to have database discussions. I know the community colleges have been very active in that with their Achieve efforts and others, and so I think we can complement what you've been wanting to do yourselves, and also we can do more for especially the small institution that has very few resources to do data analysis themselves, and we can help them do that if they ask.
Are these available for our boards?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact,
I think we sent copies to everyone.
Our board, we received these in April and have distributed them. I would say that I use this a lot as an almanac, and one thing I'm thinking as our funding models are changing and as the dialogue changes, a really nice measure to be included in here to complete the picture might be one on labor market outcomes. If there was a comparison between the average wage earning of your student versus the median wages of where you serve, or however you might be able to do that. But as we had to look for that kind of information to complete our Aspen nomination, it told a story I hadn't seen before. And I think that's very important to us in our community, and I suspect it's very true across TSTC as well as the other two-year colleges.
And Mimi, we can help you with that. There's a new website that has just been developed called Compare College Texas that actually has first-year data for wage earners.
Right. I was just thinking maybe
including some of it.
One more little line in this almanac. Just what you didn't want to hear.
You'd be surprised how many people tell us just one more data point.
I'm about to say, that font is going to get smaller and smaller, and the page
is going to get larger and larger.
And that's something that's important to discuss too. Is I'm always concerned about having, strangely enough, too much data in that. You want to have the right available data to look at. And so over time, it may be that everyone agrees we should focus on certain data points, and the others we will still calculate, but we want to make sure we have just those data points available so that they can find them, people can find them easily, and sort of maybe rotate some things through as appropriate at the time. And we know, and I know we've discussed a lot internally, that we're going to be much more focused on the workforce than we have been before. Thus, this data site. We've had data out there, but people haven't been aware it's there. We think this will help make it more so. But as you use it, it's really going to be important that you let us know about this type of analysis or comparison, because you're at your school, you know what's more useful, and we need that kind of feedback to make this the most useful. We don't want to just arbitrarily put these data out there, and we don't, but we can only base it if you share with us some of the things that you think are most important. Otherwise, we have to make some of those decisions independently.
Go ahead. I was just going to thank Susan for coming down, and sorry we pulled you out of the meeting, but Greg, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell Susan how much I appreciate you working on the out-of-state information. I know that is not significant for many of the colleges in the state, but for those of us that are on the border, it is. I know that I'm expecting our transfer out rate to increase by at least 50%. I don't think that people realize that if you live in Panola County, you could drive 10 miles and be at LSUS, and of course in that rural area, that's about a 10-minute drive. So of course we have students that leave us and go there, or leave us and go to Louisiana Tech, or probably. I think that we share more students with Bossier Parish Community College than we do Kilgore College or Angelina College. Many of our students transfer to Northwestern, to Natchitoches. Of course, Nacogdoches is who we send most of our students to, but that also goes into our graduation rate as well, because many students will take everything they can at Panola College, but there are so many strong family ties. There's so much economic exchange between East Texas and the western part of Louisiana. It's not uncommon for one spouse to work in Louisiana, the other in Texas. They may live on one side or the other. But if you're going to Panola College and you know that ultimately you're going to earn your degree from Northwestern or from Louisiana Tech, there's one course that you have to earn an associate's degree, and that is Texas government. But guess what? Louisiana doesn't care about Texas government.
Well, they should.
Yeah, they should. And as someone who has degrees in political science and taught Texas government, I think everyone should. But I understand from the parent standpoint and the student standpoint that if taking that course does not move them closer to their goal of earning that bachelor's degree, I completely understand why they don't want to take the time and pay the money, and so they leave us without graduating and move on to that university. So I certainly want to recapture them once they have that bachelor's degree and get credit for what we did.
Yes, and we are working on it.
I know you are, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Back and forth trying to figure out, they have different file structures, and so we're trying to figure out how to get that into the process without both killing your institutional representatives that are working on doing it and making them do too much work, and making my staff kind of get it all in place.
Well, Susan is an institution that has that similar situation. I have 120 students that are attending an Oklahoma university on my campus in Texas, and I'm about to open a new building at another side of my campus that will house that university in a new program. And so $0 Texas dollars being allocated to that bachelor's degree, that's number one. But number two, our students don't have to leave to get that bachelor's degree, but we don't get credit for those. We have the same issue. Oklahoma doesn't care about Texas government either. But you made a comment earlier, and so as we work through this transfer issue, you made a comment about working with TWC on looking at labor data across states. And I'm hopeful that includes the states that are contiguous to Texas.
They have 20. All I know at this point is that they have 20 states. I don't have the complete list that are supplying their information to that federal program. I don't know which states they are at this point. I would love for it to be the contiguous states, but that is a workforce issue, and I'm not sure who it all. I can get that list from them of who's participating at this time, but.
Well, as important as the transfer issue is for us, as we look to success points being based upon some sort of outcome as it relates to workforce education, we're going to need that data, especially those border institutions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would need to have some sort of offset for us. Luckily, in some ways, the labor shed in my area falls south towards the Dallas area, and so they're most likely to be captured in Texas. But we do have a casino on the other side of the river, and a lot of people work there as well. So that project is more important outside of just what you were talking about. It's important for our long term, what we're looking at.
It is at a very important, and I know at the federal level they are hoping to expand and to get all 50 states involved. I just don't think they're there yet. And so,
can we have you find out, Gary, and let us know which, do they include New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana? Yeah.
Sure.
And that may be something we could put a little bit of effort on. And
Yeah, many of these questions that are somewhat open-ended, as quick as we can, we'll try to get the answers for you and send out to this group, not only meeting minutes, but then specific answers to these questions.
Appreciate that.
Susan, a point of clarification that we had earlier with regards to the average semester credit hours to associate degree, does that include developmental hours?
No,
it does not
include
Credit-bearing
developmental hours. Credit-bearing
That's
only.
the question we brought her down here for, right? Okay.
You had one additional question, I believe. I think it was Greg, which was about the calculation of the time to degree.
I think that one came from Jeremy, but my question was, does it include any technical hours that a student may take? And the example I gave was we have, and not an insignificant number of students who start off in welding and maybe earn a certificate in welding, and then they look at those students who are in our petroleum technology and the fact that they're graduating and starting off with earning $65,000 a year, and they then get into that program.
That might be a good idea.
And, yeah. And then another, not as common, but fairly common, a student who goes through the vocational nursing program, works for a little while, then comes back and pursues that associate degree to become a registered nurse. So would all of those hours get counted?
With the new data that we're collecting, the individual S information, which is the students in individual courses, we're more likely to be able to eliminate. In the past, what the institutions have reported to us was total semester credit hours for that student.
Okay.
And so what we would do is we would take the student when they graduated and keep tracking them back till we find a first-time entering. But if they found, we track them back from the first time they have a degree, unless it's been, I think, 10 years. So if they got that certificate or something within the last 10 years and then came back, we will count that as a separate, that goes into a separate pot.
So it's not
cumulative. So what we do is we look at when did we last find them. So if we find a degree record for that student, so a certificate for that student, we will say, okay, these are the hours over a certificate, and not go back to when they're a first time. If we don't find any kind of a completion record, we keep tracking back till we find them as a first time entering student. So it kind of depends on where we find them along the...
And that would include at any institutions in the state. So it might be that when you look at that 96-something hour total, that could be accumulated across 5 or 10 institutions.
Yeah,
so
easily.
And we can calculate it for a single institution, but when you hear the statewide numbers, because we do track across institutions, it would include all institutions and have direct control over that. We once found a student that was enrolled in, 7 institutions simultaneously in the state, or 60 some odd hours.
63 hours.
And both universities and community colleges, and actually ended up with a good grade point. We were afraid it was identity theft at first, and in multiple cities simultaneously. So
it was Sheldon Cooper. Yeah.
But if you earn a degree, then, like I'm thinking again, the petroleum program, we have 2 people enrolled currently. They may have just graduated that had previously earned master's degrees in English from the University of Texas.
If they earn that degree within 10 years, they are going to be in a different area. We won't be counting all of their hours.
Okay. What about dual credit? Do you count dual credit in there?
Dual credit, no, because they are coded as a first-time entering student after they have graduated from high school.
College students,
So
yeah.
the dual credit hours would not be included.
How does that work in time to degree?
The dual credit, the time to degree is not counted. The dual credit is not counted.
So-
in their time, because we assume that they have graduated from high school first.
So in order to understand this data, the number that's by each college on average semester hours to associate degrees is a measure for the students who finish there, not
Right.
necessarily begin there.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think it's important to note that they finish, so you don't have to worry about the hours for the students that don't finish or not being included in that hour. So it's not across all students and divided in some way.
It's only for those that graduated.
Okay.
So this doesn't even address the students who don't.
Well, these two data elements have sparked a lot of discussion at my institution, and we're interested in moving those down, especially as we look at federal financial aid rules changing and loans and all those things that students can't access those for the same period of time that they once did. And we're really trying to monitor that pretty closely and understand more about it. I'm curious, as the discussions evolved, how reverse transfer might start impacting that. And you probably haven't gotten there yet, and I don't really expect an answer, but I know that we will be going after more and more reverse transfers, and hopefully that'll become a success that we accomplish at our institution.
And actually, we're trying to help you with that. We have a project in place that we will be looking at students that we don't have any type of graduation. We haven't done it yet, but we have just gotten a file from DPS that has addresses for students.
And we're using that, yeah.
And we're looking at students who have a minimum of 30 hours at a community college and have transferred to a university but do not have any type of, we don't find them still enrolled, or they could still be enrolled, but they have at least, I think we're looking at 70 hours. And we're going to be developing a flyer, and probably getting input from y'all, but developing a flyer that tells them how to go about getting reverse transfer to get a associate degree.
Actually,
And so,
we started looking at my institution, just said how many have more than 60 hours, and of that file, about 20% are earning degrees, or they've already earned a degree.
okay.
We're actually tightening that up on our institution.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, the University of Texas system is working with the Community College Association on this aspect. We were wanting to do some things, and there's some mechanical issues in terms of reverse transfer. And when we heard that the UT system was working with the association, we just made the decision to contact the system and work with the system and the association so we don't have duplicate efforts on that. But one of the real issues, and I think Mimi brought this up at a meeting about a year ago, is I think it's working fairly well at your institution, but some other institutions...
With some senior institutions.
Yeah, I think Sam Houston, I believe you mentioned,
Sam's
was
been great to work
doing
with.
well. But how you get the information back is problematic, and I think Houston Community College, I think, had never anticipated the amount of information they would get back. So part of this is there some way to develop a process to more easily sort through that information, because it becomes very time-consuming on the part of the two-year institution in terms of sort of figuring out whether that fits or it doesn't fit. And so I think that's something that everyone is concerned about making happen, but doing it in an efficient way so you're not spending almost as much time sorting through the transcripts as you might teaching the student.
One other thought I had on this time to degree, where it shows that the associate's degree is 4.3 years. Have we established what we think is a realistic target? And the reason I ask that is you look through the almanac, the majority of community colleges show anywhere from 65 to 85% of their student body being part-time. So it wouldn't be realistic to assume that the number that you target should start with a 2, or something wrong is going on.
Yeah, and we have not set any type of target. This is just an informational, and that's why it is next to where the percentage of full-time and part-time.
Right. I
To
just
kind of make that
know
point.
that it was on this one slide as a state average, and I'm saying that if you look at that state average and you look at the percentage of students who are part-time, while it could be improved, it's not that long a time given the large majority of part-time attendance.
Okay, are there any other questions for Susan? Susan, thank you again for coming back and visiting with us. Okay, moving on. Next, we've got the discussion of strengthening collaborative relationships between community and technical colleges and the coordinating board. David, David, did you want to address this? I'm sorry, did you need to leave? Or the commissioner, either one of you. It says chair, but I'm not one to start this discussion.
Additional analysis we might have that could address your question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was looking at this. In a way, this isn't fair. We've got, I think, 4 topics here for you to lead, and you were the chair before
well,
you came
I just
in the
decided
meeting.
to share, okay?
I can just say, and I think after I make a few comments, you should lead the discussion. One of the points of us getting together is how to really strengthen, it's straightforward, the relationships between the 2-year institutions and the coordinating board. And with the end that we all share the goal that we want students to be successful and to really understand what we're doing and find ways to work together to that end and to have the resources needed to make that happen, to make sure those resources are used effectively. And so this is really an opportunity to begin that discussion, because the reality is we'll never end that discussion really, but I think we can make a big start today, and there'll be times where it may become a little difficult at moments, but we'll have the base for moving forward in a positive kind of way. So we've not really had that discussion in this type of forum before. We've had some individual discussions with small groups. That's one reason this committee exists. It's one reason we have a board subcommittee that's going out and meeting around the state. We're making a lot of efforts to try to meet more and more. I think on the community college side, you can see the great efforts in terms of success committee. I think that's, I went to a meeting about a month ago, and it's really amazing what the schools have accomplished together. But we want to make sure we work together, find ways to work together, because we do share a common goal of providing a better future for people in Texas. So how might we strengthen our relationship?
Well, being one that's in the publishing business, I think, it's all about communication. And I think, this group here is a good start. But I'd like to hear from some others. What ideas do you have in doing this? Anybody?
I just want to reiterate about the partnerships that we need to continue with our, junior college, with the Rio Grande, the Sul Ross Rio Grande University. We continue to work with them to enhance our institution. We have students that are working for a Bachelor of Science degree, where they can transfer their coursework and have more opportunities for our technical students. And we also like to continue to be partners with the high schools, with the dual credits, and even with businesses, with all that Eagle Ford Shell south of us there in Uvalde. We have the truck driving school and of course welding and all that, but I think just to continue with like you said, the communications and the partnerships with all these different places will enhance our students.
Okay, very good. Anybody else?
I'd just like to say, I think beginning, identifying these issues moving forward, this is going to be a great venue to be able to sit down and to talk philosophically about our initial positions, such as the statement on time to completion and all of those sorts of things. Because what happens, things get so lost in translation. And as we go back to our home districts and operate our districts as we think as we're, in conjunction with our board and as we see fit, we forget what's really the intent of the spirit of some of the things being said and or the policies that are being crafted. And specifically what I mean is, we will go back to our districts all too often and not understand really where the information's going. The word efficiency, let's just start there. What efficiency really means and what it objectively and quantitatively really means is lost. And when we go back home and we're talking about being efficient, and we're sitting here saying, "Well, we're efficient, and we're operating as efficiently as we possibly can. We're 1/3 the cost of the tuition as compared to the universities in our area, and those sorts of things for our students. And our outcomes are this, and we're working off half the budget, and so forth and so on." That's not what the state's talking about all too often. And so I think as quickly as we can identify as many points as we can in this venue, I think it's going to be critical that we just confront the facts and obviously not each other and those sorts of things. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to do that. I've been at Del Mar for coming up. I'm starting my 6th year this fall, and before all of this, as a president. In my time at other community colleges, I saw that. I'm just sitting there saying, we're not even talking the same language all too often. And so I'm hoping that I'll make my notes. I'll think about this a little bit more. As we come back here, I'll bring some solid data and or some concepts that we can work on, because I think we lose too much. We lose too much when we go back to our districts, and we're not all saying the same thing.
Anybody else?
Marie?
Yes.
The commissioner.
No, after you, please.
Well, I had a couple of comments. One is that it would be, the one thing I've learned in my 17 years as a president in Texas is that all 50 districts are very, very unique, and I'm sure you could say that about TSTC as well with your various campuses. And it's probably very difficult for someone sitting in Austin to understand all those differences. So I think just the intent of maybe using this group and other committees that you have to kind of verify the reality of what does this mean for a small college or a medium college or a very large college, rather than trying to make an assumption that one process or one need fits all needs. So I think that's a starting point to really use the membership to vent differences and kind of test them. The other thing I would say is that the one rallying point that we probably all share is excitement and enthusiasm about increasing student success. So I think keeping kind of a laser level focus on that, and there's some great initiatives going on statewide in which the coordinating board is partnering with the colleges and with TAC and with other entities, that if we build on those strengths, it will help relationships. And that keeps the focus on the outcome and not on maybe perceived misunderstandings from the past. So that would be my point there. My third one is that we've got to realize that community colleges in particular, and I don't know how to respond for TSTC, so excuse me, Mike, if I'm over-speaking here, but we need to have a great deal of value and respect for the role that local decision-making has for community colleges, and know that that's a fine balance with what goes on at the state. So if a local board is seeing a need for a program, there needs to be value in that need as it's put forward. So those would be my three comments.
Anybody else? Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, I want to follow up on what Mimi just said. The thing that concerns me more than anything else, it's probably the most salient fact of higher education, and that is over the past 40, 50 years, actually 50 years since the 60s, we've increased access to higher education dramatically, remarkably, but we haven't improved very much in terms of outcomes, particularly for students from poor backgrounds. It's still the case that if you come from the top quintile socioeconomically, you have close to a 90% chance of achieving some form of post-secondary credential. And if you come from the bottom quintile, you have less than a 10% chance. And that hasn't changed very much. We've poured billions of dollars into addressing this issue around the country, and we haven't made very much progress at all. There's a growing body of research that shows what some of the keys are, and we call it grit. We call them soft skills, non-cognitive skills, and some community colleges have done a very effective job in addressing that particular issue. But we have got to find we've got to find ways to do this more effectively and bring some of these successful activities to scale. We're going to there's a larger and larger number of students from poor backgrounds going to higher education. Almost invariably, they go to community colleges. We just have to find better ways to help these young people become successful, and that's the issue that I really look forward to working on a broad basis in this stakeholder committee, and your representative group from around the state, and we are really going to count on you to identify things that work and programs that are innovative and much more effective than what we've done in the past.
Okay. Any other comments?
Started registering students on an earlier basis for like even the fall. We started in April, and trying to get I agree with you, the access is getting them in class, and getting them to register, but that's all.
Okay. Maybe, and I see a little later down, we're going to talk about the agenda. Maybe one of the things would be for this issue on community and technical colleges, if we can kind of start laying out if this is something we really feel is important and want to work with, and it must be or it wouldn't have been put on the agenda, right? Maybe we can get some of the presidents would probably be the best ones to kind of outline the good points working together and the problem areas so we can start addressing them. I'm one of these believes if you don't put an issue on the table, you're never going to address it. And I think this group here, I doubt that anybody's real bashful or you probably wouldn't be sitting here today. So let's just, maybe we could get a little bit of homework assignment to the presidents and on both sides, kind of addressing these things, and let's start working them together.
Marie, I think there are some possibilities with TACC that are already in play in the way of formulating the association's agenda for the future that includes planning and some other things like that. And so maybe some conversations with the association to talk about, how that's going to play out and to see how relevant it is to the agenda. I just hate to go and replicate activities and time and efforts, because this is very much what we've been talking about at the association. And so I think with just a few phone calls and some conversations, I think, and a debriefing after this, we could maybe bring some things to the table directly from the association that represents the whole group.
So you're telling me something I didn't know. That sounds good. I mean, if part of it's done, let's not reinvent the wheel on it.
Yes, ma'am, and it's brand new. I mean, it's. We were just talking about this Friday at the Summer Institute. So I mean, don't think like it's been. Don't think that it's fully baked or anything at this point. But those are just kinds of some things that were talked about this past weekend.
Why don't we definitely get that on the agenda for the next meeting? Okay. And we'll rely on Jerry and David and whoever to help us get it properly worded and on there, any background stuff that we need. Okay? Does that take care of that one?
Marie, I'm curious about something, and I don't know how I expect to receive any information on this, but you've been hosting events around the state. In the strategic planning process, you go through a SWOT analysis, and so you've certainly heard what people around the state are saying. I know what I think. I know what my trustees think. I know what issues affect my institution. I've been at various meetings, and I hear what others say, but I wonder what the coordinating board is hearing out of those, and is there anything troubling that you would like us to help you work through as we craft a strategic plan going forward?
All those meetings, would you like that?
Well, the game plan, and perhaps this is a good time to mention the next meeting is at Del Mar on August 12th. Anybody wants to come to Corpus Christi for the weekend, it might be a good time, followed by a meeting on Monday. But we will ultimately write a report and summarize those findings. The discussion, I think, has a lot of it has centered around kind of the same kind of conversations we're having here today. Communication is important. I think that was the strong point at the meeting at McLennan in Waco in March. At Tarrant in May, the discussion was kind of focused on the baccalaureate nursing issue that occupied probably or perhaps half of the time, and so it's really almost the same conversation that we're having here. I can go back and pull together some of my notes from those meetings in Panola. It was a cold wintry day when we were out there. I think the conversation's really kind of centered on communication, and Greg, you can jump in here. And I think it was just really the communication and the availability of information, the transfer issues. Some of the common threads that we're hearing today are really kind of the outcomes of the meetings. So I don't think there's anything really. I think we've hit all the major key points today that we've hit in those meetings. But I can get feedback from Dr. Golden and the other task force members and bring that to y'all as well. And as I said, there will be a report probably by the October board meeting.
I think communication keeps coming up, and I think that's something we really need to work on. And there's some issues, for example, when it was mentioned that there are different types of community colleges with different resources. Our accountability system is built with that notion, and it was structured based on the recommendations of the community colleges in terms of size alone has a large difference. And so I think it's important that where we have things in place that we get some feedback in terms of how it's working and how we can use those better, or frankly, if it's not useful anymore, we ought to move on to something different. But I find when I talk to people periodically that we haven't communicated some issue well at all, or some misunderstanding of what we have, and you know this on your own campuses. I think the community colleges made a great suggestion, Bill Holder specifically, that we have community college liaisons. I mean, getting information to a campus and then getting it distributed wherever it needs to go is a problem, whether you're sitting where we are or from where you are. And I think that's something we have to figure out together how to do that. And I think the liaisons are really going to help, but I think there's a lot of work still to do there, to do with that. And we are trying to reach out. For example, with TSI, we knew there might be some administrative issues. So because they were convenient, we went down the street to ACC and sat down with Richard Rhodes, and he pulled together about 30 staff and said, okay, we're concerned about this level, but what are some things that we're doing at the state level that could have some impact administratively? And one issue came up that we didn't think we could address that the College Board had to address, and I'm glad to say the College Board fixed it. So, and we had staff contact some other schools to see if it would be the same issue. So we just need to find ways to do that more often. We really want to do that, and whatever you can do to sort of enable us or empower us or direct us better to do that, we really would appreciate, because we'd rather spend time making something happen the right way that we all agree, rather than trying to figure out what we're really wanting to do to begin with. I think your comment about what does a certain phrase mean, even how does that translate? Are we not doing a very good job of that? How do we communicate that better? I think that's really important, and you guys can help tremendously.
Yeah, I think it's like with any good research project, with any good research notion, you begin with definitions, and we all agree with that on the front end and move forward. But I can see clearly opportunities in the near future to sit down in more, albeit structured, maybe informal settings, rolling up our sleeves, coming in, and really just spending the time together to really hash these things out. Certainly, these I think they can be translated here at these meetings, but I see workshops and those sorts of things. I mean, it's just really roll up your sleeves kind of work that needs to be done.
Okay. I'm going to, David, bring you in on this one too. Discussion of how to scale best practices.
I don't know how far we can go with this today, but I think we need to at least to begin discussions. You know, there are a number of things that over recent years, I think it's with, whether at the state level or working with institutions, there are a number of things we've discovered, for example, with developmental ed that appear to be best practices. When there's some agreement on that, how do we then take that and scale it up statewide in a way that works with everyone? If you know, how can that be funded? Is it something that could in fact change in some ways institutions are funded, if it should be common practice? You know, how do we do that type of thing? We all know this isn't quite the same subject, but we're at an interesting point in the history of higher ed with what we're able to do with technology, with MOOCs, with how we can serve part-time students in different kinds of ways. There can be things that will change, and there are changing on campuses, but how can we do that in a focused way that really helps? And I really like what you were saying in terms of a laser focus on student success, because I think ultimately that's what everyone's about. I think that was echoed in the commissioner's remarks as well. So when we number one, I guess, how do we agree that we've identified best practices? And then two, once we have, how do we find a way to really implement that in a statewide fashion that really makes sense and does in fact account for that there are differences in terms of resources by institution and even the students they serve?
You know, I would go back to what I had said earlier regarding student success, and we've got some entities that are kind of self-farming right now with a lot of motivation behind them and a lot of focus. The one that comes to mind, I say a lot of focus because there are so many different institutions who are involved in different student success initiatives. Some are achieving the dream, some are completion by design, and it goes on and on and on. But I think the unifying force is that the outcome is student success, regardless of how you're funding it or whether it's just your own institutional initiative. But I think if the coordinating board were to work closely with some of those initiatives that are having that momentum right now, as you are with the new Mathways project is a good example, or with others that may come out of the Student Success Center that TAC has established, that building on those as a foundation and taking it to the next level rather than trying to recreate something would make sense to me, and I think we'd get to scale quicker. Funding will always be a question, and I think it's going to always take leveraged funding. Some's going to be state, some's going to be local, and some's going to be foundation supported or even donor supported. So I don't think there's one answer to all of that. I think you've got, with the outcomes-based funding, we've all got a motivation that's incenting it. So we've got a lot of foundation pieces in there to where I think we're going to start seeing scale happen if we continue to nurture and feed those systems that are started.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on that. I think Susan Combs came to Waco about 6-8 months ago, right before the session, and did a kind of a look forward for Texas. And using some reasonable assumptions, showed us what the state budget was going to look like in the next 8 to 12 to 15 years. And one of the things that was startling was how the percent of the state budget that is going to get gobbled up by medical needs is going to be startling. And what that means is all the other factors, education, transportation, water, all the other things that the lawmakers are struggling with right now are going to get crowded out because these will be federally mandated situations. Whether you think that's a good idea or not, it doesn't matter. What does matter is the reality is if we keep doing what we're doing, all of us are going to be elbowing each other for a diminishing resource, and that is state funding. So I think one of the really valuable things we could do in the two-year sector is ask each other under this topic, how could we work together to get better outcomes and spend less money? Because right now what we have is a situation in which in a lot of ways we behave like a cottage industry. And industrialization is marching at us quickly. And do I think we should become a Walmart? No, I don't. But I do think there are lessons we could learn from industries that have had to cope with how to be locally sensitive and at the same time leverage scale and the ability to do things together in a far more cost-effective way. Before coming to TSDC, I was a banker. I was a president of a bank, and I'd spent 20 years watching that industry go in Texas from a cottage industry in which each location in Texas was a standalone company to the massive international banking branch systems that we have today. And that system went from a local control to a big industrialized. And what they were able to do was keep the best of both. I think if discussions like that aren't had somewhere, we're going to wake up one day and go, where'd all the money go? And where did all our capacity to serve student success go? So those discussions, I think, have to happen somewhere. If it's not at a place like this under that topic of collaboration, then we ought to find someplace else. Because I think we're going to waste an opportunity if we don't.
Okay. Well, I guess that might be something else that we put on our agenda for the next time, discussion on that. All right, and then that brings us down to discussion and consideration of future agenda items and meeting dates. I think we've already got a pretty good start. And if any of you have any ideas, yes.
Well, I had two other items.
Okay.
Sorry.
Give them to me, that's fine.
And I don't know if it's for the next meeting. I think the staff can determine when they're ready to do this one. But I'm looking at the legislative presentation, and if you look on page 8, the slide about HB 5, I would like to have an update on, and the coordinating board, I understand, is going to get involved in advising or advising advisor training program. I would like to have an update on that. That includes the development of that program, inclusive of kind of an outline of content, because I'm really interested in us being able to be sure we can vet the benefits of choosing certain graduation plans and endorsements as a sounding board. The second one is relative to SB 215, and that would be if the coordinating board would kind of outline for us the process that you'll be using for negotiated rulemaking as we go forward. I think that would be of interest to this group as well.
I think so too from the discussion that went on. Did you have a comment?
Well, we had a meeting about this issue yesterday, and we're working on it, and we will keep you abreast of what we're thinking about, and obviously we're going to talk to institutions about the principles of negotiated rulemaking. But yes, we're working on it now.
Yeah, and on the other topic, just so you all know, we with our Texas advisors, they're actually being trained this summer, and so that's going to be a very quick turnaround for that. But our PETA 16 division is putting together ultimately with TEA, we're going to provide the base for how do you sort of start advising that student in the ninth grade about the different career paths, and we would be really grateful to have some feedback on that as we go forward.
I haven't always found that high school counselors have the knowledge base, so I'm not sure TEA is your sole source of
we're required to
partner on
work
that.
with
It's
them.
good. Well, I understand that. I'm just trying to say I think this would be really good in its infancy or formative stage to have some more vetting with two-year colleges.
No, we would like that, and I think it has a great deal of bearing on your work. And that's why, because of what you said, is why we're trying to develop the base to provide as we go forward with them. We're also going to work with the Jan Fries and the Counselors Association as well. And so staff is working on the first pass on that right now. And I'm not sure what the deadline is for that being available, but we would be glad to share it with you, I believe. And if you'd like for us to share it with your group, I think we will surely have at least a first draft before you meet next. And so if you get that, if you have some comments, we would like that.
I think that's probably 4 pretty good agenda items for the next time, and if anybody else has something, please email.
One other issue that we need to start working on very quickly is that provision in House Bill 5 that some of the local option courses that can be used in the endorsements have to be developed jointly by the local school district and by a proximate institution of higher education. In most cases, that will be two-year institutions. I've had a couple of preliminary conversations with Commissioner Williams about developing some principles of how these courses would be developed and some common standards for rigor and so forth that would be developed jointly by the coordinating board and by TEA, so that we would distribute these standards to local school districts as well as institutions of higher education so that they have some general principles in mind. The local institutions wouldn't be bound by these principles, but they would have some baseline information available to them as they start developing these courses. Because one thing that we're concerned about is that these courses that are developed to satisfy the various endorsements will be all over the place in terms of content, in terms of rigor, in terms of how well they prepare students to actually do well in post-secondary education, whether it's a college or a university.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda is basically our last thing is discussion and consideration of possible future agenda items, which we've done, and meeting dates. We could meet quarterly, but I'm going to throw something out. I really take this seriously, what we're doing, and I think we can make an impact on improving things. But I would suggest, and I'll ask for a vote, but I would suggest we meet like every 2 months instead of quarterly. I think quarterly sometimes, it gets away from you a little bit more than if we're meeting. It looks like we've got a lot to do and a lot to work on. But saying that, I'd like to ask for a show of hands on who would prefer to meet quarterly instead. How about every 2 months?
I like your idea, Marie.
Okay, all right, then let's go with that. And Gary, can you get us some dates?
Yeah, well, I had kind of prepared dates for quarterly, so we'll have to go back and look at.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Well, I think it's
September would probably be what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
I will look this afternoon, and we'll get some meeting dates out to the group, and some possible meeting dates, and try to get that resolved as quickly as possible before we get everybody's calendars filled up.
And one other thing there was some discussion ahead of time on the time. I think it would be better if we moved that back a little bit, because we had people getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning so they could be here today. And I know we don't do lunch, but if we could meet from 11 to 1, people could either eat a hearty breakfast or eat lunch after 1 o'clock.
We can do lunch.
Oh, you can even do lunch?
We'll find a way to do lunch.
Okay, well, we'll do lunch then. And maybe, give us, I've been trying to watch time because I like to keep within times. We're a few minutes past 11, but not too much. But maybe even if we go till, say, 11 to 1:30, would that be okay with everybody? Okay.
I like that meeting time because that would allow
Early morning flight.
it to be a one day away from campus
Yeah.
rather than two.
Okay, do we need a vote on that? 11 to 1:30? Okay, do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, this has been great, and I'm sorry. Yes,
It was suggested to me, Bill Franz, our general counsel, who's interested beyond being a lawyer, suggested that if you guys have some ideas or suggestions for what should be included in those materials for counselors about HB5, if you'd go ahead and send those to us now, if you have some things, we can incorporate them sooner. We'll still share it with you after we have our first pass. But if you have some specific things you'd like for us to pay attention to, feel free to send those to us directly, and you can send those to me, and I'll get those to that division to work on.
and I apologize, I didn't get my agenda because we had the gal at the college's email. So when I looked on this and saw committee chair, sorry for putting on to you, but I was not sure where to go with that, so I
Well,
apologize.
I'm not sure you should have known. So when I looked at it, I realized we should have thought about that, and so I apologize.
No, that's okay. I think this is really good, and I'm really hopeful that we can help make a difference, and I thank everybody for being here, and I guess meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.